Hello everyone, welcome back. Previous video, we created our game settings windows. If we go in here real quick, host a game, and accept, and we go in here and we find it. Take a second. We find it, and if we go into our game settings now, we see our game settings window. We can change some settings, so we're going to go to Arena 02. We'll change the time limit all the way up to 25. We can hit accept. Those changes are reflected in our lobby, and our client sees those changes as well. What we're going to do in this video now is when we go to game settings, we're going to do finish off our game settings so that when we click this button for the kick player, all of our connected clients will appear in this list, and then we can click on one of those and remove that person from our lobby if we'd like. So that's what we're going to do in this video. Let me close these out. And before we do that, we are going to have to jump through a couple blueprints or widget blueprints here and blueprints. First thing that we're going to have to do is inside of our lobby game mode. So under lobby or blueprints, lobby, open up the lobby game mode. There's an event in here that we're going to have to create. So let's move these over. We have one here already called add to kick list, which we'll do a little bit later as well, I think. So first, let me move these over down a little bit more. First one that we'll do, let's add a custom event. And this custom event is going to be called You Have Been Kicked. You have been kicked. And this is going to be run on the server and reliable. And it's going to have an input of the integer type. And let's go ahead and say that this is the player ID. So the player ID, and that'll correspond to which player we want to kick. So once we have that, let's compile. Once we have that, we can then, let's expand this and get all of our player controllers now. Hold control, drag this in. Drag off of this, we're going to get from that the corresponding player ID. And from that, what we'll do now is cast to lobby PC. So our lobby player controller. I'm going to convert this to a pure cast just because we don't need the executable. And inside of our lobby player controller, we added an event called kicked. So telling our player controller that we have been kicked. Let's connect that up. Like so. And that's all we need to do. So let's add a commenter on this and say kick the selected player from the lobby. So let's compile and save. And we're going to come back to this a little bit later. Some other things that we'll need to do in here. But for now, I think we're good. So I'm going to leave it docked up here. And I'm going to go down in the content browser to the lobby. And we're going to set up our player button now. So let's go ahead and open that up. Mine opened off screen. And the player button, we'll set up the design tab because it's going to be super, super simple. Let's go ahead and kill the canvas panel. We don't need that. All we need is a button. So I'll drag this button down here, and I'll hit F2 on it and call it the player button. If we want, we can go into style and make sure that we highlight it. So hovered tint of yellow, just like so. And let's go ahead and set this to desired on screen so we see it like that. And now what we're going to do is let's compile, and let's open up our connected player. So inside the connected player, let's take our player slot and copy it. So right-click, copy, because this is what's going to appear on top of our button. So now we can go back to the player button, and on top of our button, let's right-click and paste, like so. Now we don't necessarily, we could leave it just like this, but we don't necessarily need the not ready, and we don't need their selected character unless you want to keep that stuff. But I'm going to delete that because we don't necessarily need it. And let's take this one. Delete this. So this is what it will look like. It'll have their avatar, and it'll have the player name of the person that we want to kick. So let's compile and save. That's all we're going to do for our design layout of this button. And let's hop over to the graph because there's some things that we need to do in here. Let's go ahead and kill the event tick. Don't need that. The event construct we do need. What we're going to do is create a variable. This variable is going to be called player info. And it's going to be of the player info type. So Let's add it to a category just because I want to. We'll just call it player info. We'll also set it to replicated. And let's go ahead and control drag that in now after we compile. So control drag this in, and we'll break it apart now. And then what we'll do is promote the player name and player image to a variable. So let's do that. Let's promote this to a variable called name of player. And promote this to a variable called image of player, or avatar, I guess would probably be a better name because that's what that actually is. So let's connect these up. So. And one thing we need to make sure on our player info is to select it, and let's make it editable and expose it on spawn, and you'll see why here in a second. So we want that to be exposed on spawn so we can set it. Let's add a comment around this, and we'll say get the player info and populate the button. Okay, now we need to define what happens when you click on this button. So we'll get our player button, add an on clicked for it. And what we're going to do now is get our game mode. So get the game mode, cast to our lobby game mode, and call that function that we created a moment ago called you have been kicked. Now it's asking for the player ID. Which player do we need to kick? We're going to promote this to a variable because we don't know what that's going to be. And we'll call it the player. We could call it player ID as well. Let's just call it player ID. And let's move all of these under player info. Oops. Just because I want to. And we'll set the player ID to replicated. Probably don't need to, but it doesn't hurt. Last thing that we'll do is say remove from parent, so that we remove this widget from its parent once we've decided to kick the player. Set a comment around this and say clicked player button, call you have been kicked in lobby GM to kick the player. Okay, that's all we need to do for our button. That's really it. Let's compile, save this. We can actually close this now. We can close the connected player too. We don't need that anymore. What we do need to do is go inside of our game settings now. So let's go to our game settings. So lobby game settings. Open that up. Go to the graph. And inside of it, we have a fill players window event that we haven't touched yet. So let's go ahead and work on that. And that will be all that we need to do for this game settings window. So for this, what we're going to do now is say get game mode. And then drag off this, cast to lobby game mode. We can connect this up. And inside the lobby game mode, we have all of our connected players info. So we're going to say get connected players. We're going to need this in a second. We're going to take our player window, players window. Where is it? Let's make sure it's the right one. Do we call it players window? I don't think we called it anything yet. So inside of here, vertical box, we just called it scroll box. So we need to rename this and give this something of a better name, something like players window. And we need to make that a variable actually. So on the design tab, it's the scroll box. We actually didn't give that a name, thought we did. So now on our graph, we should be able to see our players window. There it is. So let's hold control, drag that in, because we're now going to clear that. So clear children. Connect this up. So after we're done clearing it, we're going to run a for each loop. So for each of our connected players, we're going to do that. So let's hold F, left click, pick this up, move that over, and plug this into there. So for each of our connected players, we're now going to add a player button, essentially, to our players window list. So the first thing that we want to do is run a check, though. We want to make sure that we are not pulling index 0, which will be the server. We don't want to kick ourselves from the map unless we want to. So first thing that we'll do is we'll drag off of this and hit 2 equal signs and say, is array index 0? If it is, we're going to hold B, left click, create a branch, connect this up, connect that up. If it's 0, then we're not going to do anything. If it's not 0, what we're going to do is right click and create a widget. That widget is going to be a player button. So a player button. And let's connect this up. And nifty tool right here is this magnifying glass. Let's go ahead and click that because I'm noticing something else here. Let's click that. Open up our player button. Go to the graph. Let's make our player ID also editable and exposed on spawn because we're going to need those. So let's compile and save that now. Little bit of hopping back and forth, but we're almost done. Now we can go back to our game settings. There's that variable. So now we can say get the index, plug that in, and then get the array element for our player info, plug that in so that it gets populated inside of our player button there. Once we've done that, then we can take our players window, copy and paste it down here and just say add child. Content we are adding is this return value, so go ahead and plug that in and plug that in. So that is how we fill the players list. So I'm going to add a comment around this and say fill the player list window inside game settings when called. So let's compile and save this. Close this out. And let's see. Double check my notes. Yeah, I think we're good. There's a couple other things that we need to do, but we're going to do those in a second after I show you this. So let's go ahead and play. Let's play in the editor here. And I'm going to go to the server window and host and pick a game name and something like this and find a match with my client. Doing a lot of our networking testing via LAN. All of this will carry over to internet, and we'll test everything out in the end with Steam up and running. This should all work. So if we go now to our game settings and we go to kick player, it says kick. It says player name. Did we not bind those properties? Of course we didn't bind those properties. Of course we didn't. Getting ahead of myself. So the button is here. We need to bind those properties. If I press this, it actually kicks our player, but the values didn't appear on there because we didn't bind the properties. So it does work. Let's just hook up those properties. So inside of our player button, let's go to the designer. And this here, we need to bind that to, let's see, bind that to image of player. Go here, bind this to name of player. Forgot about those bindings. Let's compile and save. Now if we test, we host the game, find a match, accept. Accept. Okay, on our game settings, we say, okay, we want to kick a player. There's Mr. Nice Guy. Now it says the same name because we are pulling the same save file information. So it says the same thing right now, but it will be this character here. If we click this, it removes the guy from the lobby. However, there's some things that didn't happen. We didn't update the list here, so he still appears here on the server side. If we had other clients, I think it would display it there as well. So there's a couple other things that we need to do to finish this off. So let's hit escape. And let's finish this off by going to the lobby game mode. So we can close this out, close this out. Inside of the lobby game mode, we have our add to kick list. That's another edge case that we'll have to account for, which we'll show that in a moment as well. But there is an event called, if we right click, event on logout is what we're going to use here. So when we log out, we'll have the exiting controller. So we're going to take our all player controllers here, control drag that in, and let's do a for each loop with break. So for each loop with break. there a shortcut for that? I don't know if there is. I know F is for each loop, but is something else? No, that's gate. Don't know. I'm just checking. I'll have to look that up myself. I don't know if there is one for breaks. So anyway, let's go ahead and connect our all player controllers into the array here, because that's what we're going to be searching. And we want to find the player controller in our variable that equals this player controller that's exiting. So we'll drag off of this and say equal. And it's equaling the exiting controller. So. And we'll create a branch, be in left click, condition, plug that in, plug that in. If it doesn't equal that, then we're not going to do anything. But if it does, we are going to break at that point. So I'm just going to hook it back around to break, like so. And once we're done with that, we're then going to get from this. So get, move this over a little bit. We're then going to get that index that we broke on. So let's plug that in. And from this, we can cast to the lobby player controller. Hook this up there. So. And inside of here, there's going to be something that we're going to do. Let me compile this and save this before we do it. We haven't done any character selection yet. That's next on our list to do. But what we essentially need to do is find out what character they had selected and then set that value inside of our available characters back to available again so that other players can select them if they want to. Otherwise, that character will still be locked away because we haven't reset it. So we're going to need to hop to our lobby player controller for a second. So all levels, lobby player controller. And inside of our lobby player controller, we're just going to create our replicated integer variable. So let's just create a variable. That variable is going to be called selected character. It's going to be an integer. We'll put it inside of player info, and it's replicated like so. And let's save that. That's all we're going to do. We're not going to do anything with it just yet, but we're going to need that value. So back in our lobby game mode, what we can do now is get that value. So get selected character. It's kind of like the character ID that we have. And then we can take our all available characters here, hold control, drag that in, drag off of it, and set array element. So we're going to set the array element for this at this particular index. And we're going to leave it to false or not checked, because we're going to uncheck that and say that that character is now available. So we're getting this out of the way. We haven't done any character selection yet, but we're going to do that in the next video. Next thing that we'll do is take our all player controllers, hold control, drag that in, drag off of this, and we're going to use the remove index. So remove index. That's going to be the next thing that we do. Like so. And the index that we're going to be removing at is going to come from our array index here. So I'm going to drag this down. It could probably promote that to a variable, but I'm just going to do it like this. So reroute. Just move that up. So that's the index that we are removing at. We need to do the same thing for our connected players. So we're going to take our connected players, control drag that in, and remove index. It's going to be at the same index. I'm going to take this, plug it in. And once we've done that, we're going to call everyone update. So everyone updates, which will go through the process of repopulating these. So we'll call everyone update at this point. OK. So let's add a comment around this. And this is the event on logout. Removes player controller and connected player info, resets available character. Well, it doesn't necessarily reset, but updates. Okay, so there we go. Move these down. So we still have our add to kick list. We'll do that in a second. Just wanted to show you why we need this. So if I play the editor now, and I go to host a game, and I say LAN 2 players, and I go find a match, accept, and we accept, and I go to my game settings now and kick player, and I say kick this guy. He has been removed from the settings window here, and removed from the lobby. So let's test this one more time with 3 players. I have to get really creative with my screen space here. So we have this one, we have this one, and we have this one. So hosting a game, let's say 5 players, and this guy finds a match, he accepts. Accept, and this guy also finds a match. Accept. So we have 3 people in here, and let's go to this, and just for the heck of it, let's change this and this. Accept. Both of these guys see those updates, cool. But this guy says, okay, let's go and kick one of these guys. So I'm going to kick this guy. I don't know which one it is because we're using the same project, but we'll say this guy, we'll kick him. That guy is gone. This guy sees him removed as well on the client. Server sees that as well. Now the problem is if this guy tries to reconnect now, and I have my game settings window up, so I'll find a match, click accept. Yes, I want to join. I rejoin now. However, because the game settings window was up at the time on the kick list, he wasn't added to this. So we need to account for that if this edge case, if the window is up and somebody joins. And that's what that add to kick list is going to do for us. So let's go ahead and do that, and then we should be able to be done with this. So the add to kick list here, let's right click and say get player controller. And we'll just say cast to lobby player controller. So, and inside of this we should have a lobby, get lobby menu WB. So we get that. First of all, make sure that it's valid. Make sure that that's valid. If it's not valid, we're not going to do anything. If it is valid, we're going to get the game settings window. So get game settings. It's the game settings, not get set, not set game settings. So get game settings. Once we have that, there's the function in there that we called fill players window. And if we double click on it, it should take us to that, which we've already set up, which is good. So inside of our lobby game mode now, what we're going to say, is this game settings window currently visible? So is visible. I'm going to branch off this, connect this up, connect that as our condition. So if the window is already visible, then we need to call this function to fill out the players window again. So we'll call that. And that should be all we need to do for that. So we'll say adds a player to the kick list if the game settings window is open. So let's compile and test this. So compile and save. And we'll play, let's just do 2, we don't need to do 3. So I'm going to play, and my server here I'm hosting, picking a name. I'm going to open the game settings window and go to the kick players, nothing appears. If I find a match now, accept. And let's accept. In here it should populate it, which it did. So that edge case is something that we accounted for. In the event that the player has the server has the game settings window open at the time, we still need to add the player to that menu. Let's kick him too, because that's fun. Get out of here. So that's it. That's what we're going to do for the game settings window. That is good for now. We're going to pause here. We'll pick it back up in the next video. We start working on the character select, the design layout of that. so that players can choose a different character, because that would be cool. So we'll pause here. We'll pick it back up then when we start working on the character select window. Thank you guys for watching. We'll see you then.